Welcome to Humble Beginnings, the Undrafted podcast. I'm your host, Rochelle Hamilton Jr., and we got some good stuff coming for you today on the podcast. The Denver Broncos, they played 2 games last week. I'll have reaction from them against the Rams on Sunday and then them against the Cardinals on Thursday. Man, the Broncos, they look like such a Jekyll and Hyde team last week. I don't know what I'm going to do with the Denver Broncos, and why do they continue to play with my emotions and my feelings like this? I just don't get it, football Jesus. But anyway, so I have reaction from both of those games last week. The NBA, the National Basketball Association, made its return, its glorious return this past week, and I am all for it. So many great storylines in the NBA this 2018 season, because that NBA offseason was lit. Then on top of that, we got Tyreek Hill, who received a beer bath on Sunday night from a Patriots fan. So without further ado, I'll just go ahead and get into the low with Ro. The Denver Broncos losing streak continued on Sunday as they lost to the Los Angeles Rams in a close one, 23-20. Now with this loss, the Broncos, they dropped down to 2-4 at the time, and then they went on with that one. They lost. That put them at 4 losses in a row. Then they went on the road Thursday night against the Arizona Cardinals, and they got the win, of course, the blowout win, 45-10. But before this win last Thursday, or before this win on Thursday, their last win was way back in week 2 against the Oakland Raiders. So what exactly is going on with the Denver Broncos? Well, there's a lot going on with the Denver Broncos, and to be honest with you, unfortunately, it's just not a lot of good things going on in Denver, because despite that win on Thursday, you still can't get caught up in that, because there's a lot of unanswered questions with the Denver Broncos. Coming into that game on last Sunday, I was looking for improvement from Case Keenum and the Denver Broncos offense as a whole. As far as Case Keenum goes, would he get rid of the ball quicker? Would he not stare down wide receivers as much? Would he go through his progressions more instead of locking on to one dude? Can the offense as a whole improve in the red zone? Will the Broncos commit to the run and stick with it? Will they get the tight ends more involved? And the answer on Sunday to every one of those questions was no. Now, honestly, the Broncos were very competitive in Sunday's game. Now, despite the ill-advised penalties, despite Todd Gurley running it down the Broncos' throats to the tune of 208 yards on 28 carries, what is going on with this Broncos rushing defense? I don't understand. But despite all of that, the Broncos were actually in this game until the very end. Now, they came out doing what they've proven to be good at on offense. They moved the ball between the 20s, because when it comes to moving the ball between the 20s, the Broncos, they got to rank near the top, because they move the ball in the middle of the field like nobody's business. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, when it comes down to putting the ball in the end zone, when you hit that thick traffic zone that is the red zone, they just can't seem to put the ball in the end zone enough on a consistent basis. Case Keenum came out with plenty of short passes, and the offense got into a little bit of a rhythm. They got a little something going. And then they got Phillip Lindsay and they got Royce Freeman involved early, which is what they needed to do. So when I see them getting the run involved and I see them committing to the run early on in the game, I'm like, okay, they're moving the ball pretty well on the Rams defense. And I'm thinking, okay, they finally started to learn their lesson. Let's pound the ball down these dudes' throat and keep Jared Goff and that number 1 Rams offense on the sideline, and then we can get out of here with a W. And Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald, they're the 2 big boys up front for the Rams, of course. So I figured it was going to be tougher for Denver to move the ball on the ground than it was. Now, the Rams, they held the Broncos to 60 yards rushing in check. But like I was saying earlier, the Broncos, they tend to abandon the run game way too early in the game. They only rushed the ball 17 times. So, yeah, that if they would have committed to running the ball more in that game, they could have busted that defense in the mouth, and those runs could have gotten bigger and they could have gotten longer. So, on that aspect, I was disappointed. Then Case Keenum, he goes out and he does something that we haven't seen him do very much of this season. He threw a deep pass to Emmanuel Sanders for 43 yards. Now, originally, when I saw this play, I'm like, oh, boy, here we go. Case Keenum is going deep. He's hitting his favorite target, Emmanuel Sanders. And, I'm sitting there thinking, man, the Broncos, we about to get on a roll. Like, the offense is doing something that I haven't seen them do very much this often. Case Keenum, he seems like he's on. Let's get it. Then, come to find out, Emmanuel Sanders, he landed at the 1. Okay, no biggie. Then this ref throws this bull jive flag on a bull jive taunting call because Emmanuel Sanders, once he caught the ball, he got up and waved his finger in the DB's face, talking trash like wide receivers and DBs do. That's every day, every game, sometimes every play in the National Football League. So, the ref, he got in his feelings. I guess, he had been listening to Drake before the game, and, he saw Kiki, and he got all in his feelings, and he threw the flag. Anyway, after this game, Emmanuel Sanders said the league is getting soft, and he's absolutely right, because all he did was talk a little bit of trash, and, yeah. Anyway, I'm not even going to get on that. So with that taunting penalty, that's a 15-yard penalty, so instead of the ball being placed at the 1-yard line, the Broncos, they get knocked back to the 16-yard line. So, okay, yes, it's a momentum killer, but at the end of the day, you're still in the red zone. And the Broncos, they didn't score the touchdown. They only got 3 points out of it. And at the end of the day, even though that might be a momentum killer, you have got to find a way to get touchdowns in the red zone, especially against a team like the Los Angeles Rams, because at the end of the day, the Rams, they're going to get their points. So you got to find a way to get 7 on the board instead of 3. Now, the most frustrating thing about the Broncos offense, though, it's not Case Keenum. As frustrating as he's played at some points in the season, he's not the most frustrating aspect of the Broncos offense. The most frustrating thing about the Broncos offense is the fact that Denver has the best running game in the league. Seriously. This is not the Broncos fan Rochelle talking to you. This is fact. Through the first 6 weeks of the season, the Broncos' rushing average of 5.3 yards a carry is number 1 in the NFL. Yet, and still, the Broncos, for whatever reason, they tend to abandon the run extremely quickly. In Sunday's game, like I told you earlier, the Broncos' offense, they ran 58 plays total. They ran the ball on 17 of them. 17 times out of 58 total plays, they ran the ball. You got the number 1 rushing offense in the league, and you run the ball 17 times. They had Case Keenum throw it the other 41 times. That's the most frustrating thing with the Broncos offense, because it seems like they're trying to make Case Keenum into a pocket passer. Case Keenum is not a pocket passing quarterback. He thrives on play action. He thrives on those bootleg type of plays. He thrives on kind of like gadget plays where you really kind of just keep the defense guessing. That's why the Broncos offense looked so good Thursday against the Cardinals, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. That was the frustrating thing about the Broncos. Now, the good thing is, as bad as the defense got gashed on the ground Sunday against the Rams, they held the number 1 offense in the NFL to 23 points, which was their lowest total of the season. The 2018 Denver Broncos defense was the first defense in history to allow back-to-back 200-yard rushers. 208 yards to Todd Gurley on Sunday. The Sunday before, they allowed 219 yards to Isaiah Crowell of the New York Jets. Now, in the 98 or 99-year history, or however long the NFL's been around, they are the first unit to get that quote-unquote distinction. No good. So coming into Thursday's game, I was like, okay, Broncos got to get something going on here, because there was a sense of desperation to this Broncos team after this loss on Sunday. And you heard all the chatter about Vance Joseph possibly getting fired if they lost this game on Thursday. Then you heard Von Miller come out and challenge his teammates to go out and beat the Cardinals a double money sign. So coming into Thursday's game, or after the game on Thursday, I was like, bruh, where has this Broncos team been literally all season? Because they look like such a Jekyll and Hyde team on Thursday, because the Broncos team that we saw on Thursday night against the Cardinals, they look like the Denver Broncos teams of, well, on defense, they look like the 2015 Broncos defense. On offense, they look like, man, I would almost have to say maybe like the 2012 version. I'm not comparing Case Keenum to Peyton Manning by any stretch of the imagination, but just the way that they opened up the offense and the way that they pulled out those little gadget plays and they threw it downfield and they got creative. It reminded me of when Peyton Manning used to be here and they used to do all those not trick plays, but they used to do all those, just all those plays on offense where they really just kept the defense guessing. And they look like a completely different squad on Thursday. Now, they look much improved on Thursday, but let's be honest. It's really hard for me to put a lot of stock into that game on Thursday for the simple fact that you got to show consistency in the NFL. You know, the NFL is not a league where you can just come out one game, do that one game, 1 or 2 games, and then get off scot-free. Now, you got to be consistent. Then on top of that, if you think back to last year when the Broncos put up 42 points on the Dallas Cowboys in week 2, they beat the Cowboys, 42-17 up in Denver. Then they come out the next week against the Buffalo Bills. They drop that game. Then the next game they beat the Oakland Raiders. And then after that, the wheels just fell off because that's when they went on that 8-game losing streak before they saw a win again, I think, against the Colts later on in the season. So you can't get too caught up in a blowout win, I should say. You can't get too caught up in that. And then on top of that, let's be honest, the Arizona Cardinals, they're a bad team. They're going through some struggles right now in Arizona. And another reason why I kind of hesitate to get on this bandwagon with the Broncos is the fact that it seems like every time I do sit up there and say the Broncos, they look a little bit better. They look much improved. It seems like I jinx them, and then they fall right back down to where they were. Now, despite having said all that, you know, it's hard to gauge it. But now I will say this. Even though as hard as it is to gauge it with everything I just said, sometimes you need a good tune-up game against a team that's struggling to kind of get your confidence back and to really kind of see what truly worked and what didn't work. Then you can kind of go back over the previous 4 weeks, and then you can say, okay, well, we did this game against this squad. What are some similarities between this squad and some of the ones we beat? On top of the fact that, you know, what are some of the things that happened in these 4 losses? What are some of the things that happened that we really didn't like, and what are some things that happened that we did like, and how can we take all this and mix it to a bag of consistency? Now, one thing that is frustrating about the Broncos is the Broncos as a whole, they've got talent. They've got talent on both sides of the ball, because if you think even in the 4 losses, they were competitive with the Rams. They lost by 3 points to the Rams. They actually had a lot of opportunities to take control of that game and win it. The penalties is what really held them back. They had some questionable play calling in there. They had missed opportunities, so they lost that game. The game against the Jets, well, they laid an egg that game. They got blew out that game. We won't even count that. The game against the Chiefs, they had the Chiefs down by 10 points coming into the 4th quarter. They made some bad decisions, and they literally threw that game away. The game against the Ravens before that, their first L of the season, they had control of that game at the beginning of it, but they had a lot of penalties that took the game away from them. 9 penalties for 130 yards against the Ravens back in like week 3, I think it was. You know, you heard Coach Joseph say they left 20 points on the board in that game. They lost that game 27-14. So with all of that, not even counting the New York Jets loss, if they go back and fix those mistakes, then you're looking at a 6-1 Broncos team as opposed to a team that's 3-4. Well, anyway, there were some good things. There were some really good things that happened in the game Thursday against the Cardinals. The defense was on fire. They had the 2 pick sixes, the first one by Todd Davis on the second play of the game. Then they had the 53-yard pick 6 by my dog, Chris Harris Jr., because Chris Harris Jr. is going to ball out. 25, Strap Harris is going to do his thing whether or not the defense as a whole is struggling. I love that dude. The defense, they were attacking. They were aggressive. They looked like flashes of the 2015 unit with the energy and aggressiveness that they brought out that night. Then there was the offense. They threw some trickery off in there. That 28-yard touchdown pass from Emmanuel Sanders to Cortland Sutton on that reverse was nothing short of just straight up beautiful. I mean, it was like looking at that picture of the pretty girl that you got a crush on, and then you just can't take your eyes off of it. I was just like, bro, what is going on with the Broncos? I'm not used to seeing this. So that SMU connection was showing out right there. And then in the post-game interview, Emmanuel Sanders said they call that play SMU right. So I thought that was a really neat wrinkle that the Broncos offense threw in there. And then as far as Emmanuel Sanders had a game Thursday night. So he comes out. He shows out with that 28-yard touchdown pass. Then he came out and he caught a long touchdown pass of his own from Case Keenum. I think that was like I don't even know how long the touchdown pass was. It was a long one. Now, Emmanuel Sanders, he actually joined Broncos history on Thursday night because he's the first Broncos player since John Elway to throw for a touchdown and to catch a touchdown all in the same game since John Elway did it back in 1986. Now, as far as my fantasy squad, Emmanuel Sanders, he racked me up some major points. Racks on racks on racks. Well, anyway, it was actually Emmanuel Sanders, Cortland Sutton, Brandon McManus, Von Miller, and Philip Lindsay. All 5 of those dudes racked me up 96.10 points on my fantasy squad. I normally don't even play with that many Denver players on my squad, but I had a hunch going into Thursday night, and I'm so glad I listened to my hunch because it was like Football Jesus was talking to me, and then, yeah, I'm going to win my fantasy matchup this week because Football Jesus, he loves me. Anyway, Philip Lindsay. Philip Lindsay. Mama, there goes that man. Philip Lindsay is a bad boy. My favorite Philip Lindsay play from Thursday night was that one where he hit it to the left. I mean, he came out of the line, hit it to the left, and just ran down the field for a touchdown. Philip Lindsay runs hard. Philip Lindsay runs with conviction. Philip Lindsay has great vision, and he's not a very big dude. He's only 5'8" or 5'9". He might be 190, 195 pounds. He's not a very big guy, but he plays with the heart and soul of somebody that's 6'2", 6'3", and about 230 pounds. That's a bad boy. Philip Lindsay is doing the number 30 justice in Denver, Colorado. Now catch this next stat. The Broncos' 35 points that they scored in the first half Thursday night was more than they've scored in any game since week 2 of 2017. Yes, you heard that right. The Broncos' 35 points that they scored in the first half on Thursday was more than they've scored in any game since week 2 of last season. Good God almighty. That goes to show you just how much the Broncos offense has been struggling. That goes to show you how anemic that they've been the last 2 years. Von Miller, he showed out both games this week. Von Miller got 1.5 sacks on Sunday against the Rams. Then he got 2 sack fumbles Thursday against the Cardinals. Now, I'm glad my dog was able to get out of that sack drought that he had going on. Now, with those 3.5 sacks that he had in the 2 games last week, that puts him for 91 sacks in his career. He's 9 sacks short of that 100 sack milestone. He's also got 25 forced fumbles to go in his career. Von Miller is simply not human. The defense, they sacked Josh Rosen 4 times, but they had him under pressure constantly, and they were constantly hitting him. Now, the Broncos defense as a whole, they forced 5 turnovers in this game. Now, the last time they did this wasn't 2017, wasn't even 2016. The last time the Broncos forced 5 turnovers in a game was, of course, Super Bowl 50. See, this right here is the team that Broncos fans have been waiting to see. The Broncos, they've got talent on the squad. Like I said, they were competitive against Kansas City. They were competitive against the Rams. They were competitive against the Ravens. They've got talent on the squad. It's the thing that's holding this team back is the coaching and the scheme. That's what they've got to fix in Denver. So, you know, when I was watching this game on Thursday, I was like, bro, why does the Broncos do this to me? Why do they come out on Sunday and look like the team I'm used to seeing this week or this season? Then they come out on Thursday and then they throw me back to the throwback days when the Broncos wrecked shop on the NFL. But you know what? I'm not complaining. I'll take it. It's Jekyll and Hyde, but I'll take it. Now, as far as Vance Joseph bought himself a little bit of time. He bought himself a little more job security Thursday, but make no mistake about it. Vance Joseph's hot seat is still hot. He's still in trouble. There's just no other way to put it. He's still in trouble because what the Broncos got to do, they have got to be more consistent. They got to take what they did on Thursday and they've got to be consistent down the stretch. Then we'll see if this is the true Denver Broncos team or was this just an aberration, because their next game is against the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. Then they've got the Texans. Then they've got the bye week. So if they can go 2-0 or at least 1-1 in this next stretch, really they need to go 2-0 in this next stretch to even have a shot at the playoffs at this point in the season. If they can go 2-0, then I'll kind of start to become a believer in the Broncos. I'll still have my questions, but at least at that point, they'll be a little more consistent. Now, what the Broncos have got to do down the stretch, they've got to play smarter, they've got to play more disciplined football, and they have got to finish games because you can hang in with the best teams in the league all day, but if you're not handling your business all 60 minutes and you're not doing what you need to do to finish the game, then you're not going to win. And the only way to win in the NFL is to be consistent, execute, handle your business all 60 minutes, and finish the game. Now, with all that being said, if the Broncos can win these next 2 games, that will tell us a lot more about the 2018 Denver Broncos. The NBA made its glorious return to the sports landscape last Tuesday night, and they capped off what just might be the best month in sports? Think about it. In the month of October, the NFL is in full swing. The World Series kicks off in baseball. Matter of fact, the World Series kicks off tonight. And basketball makes its way back. October, you are the real MVP. Now, I'm all the way in on this. Because think about it. The NBA offseason was lit. This was probably the most lit NBA offseason that we've had in a long time. I'm ready to see how these NBA storylines play out, because the number one story, of course, is going to be the Lakers with the new look with my dog LeBron running things. Now, the Lakers, they're 0-3 right now. They kind of got off to a sputtering start, but, I'm not worried about the Lakers. They'll get it together. It takes time for talent to gel, and you got a bunch of new pieces. They got to figure out how to play with LeBron, and LeBron has to figure out how to play with these new pieces. I'm not worried about the Lakers. They'll get it together. They're not going to be champions this year. Now, next year, we'll have a different story. But as far as the Lakers go, I'm not worried about how everything is going to play out with them. But the storyline going along the season is, how are they going to gel together with him, Lonzo, Rajon Rondo, Kyle Kuzma, Brandon Ingram? How far will the Rockets get in the playoffs this year? The Rockets, they've got the roster and the talent to beat Golden State. They took them to a Game 7 in the playoffs last year. How will Melo fit down in Houston? Will he ultimately keep coming off the bench? Will he and Mike D'Antoni get along for an extended period of time? Because, we all remember how much of a disaster they were together over in New York with the Knicks some years back. What about the Boston Celtics? They've got a deep squad. Their starting five is one of the best in the league. They can hang with Golden State. Kyrie, of course, is going to do his thing. The Celtics, they got deep in the playoffs last year without Kyrie and Gordon Hayward. Now both of those cats are back, and assuming they both stay healthy, exactly how far can the Boston Celtics go? And it's good to see Gordon Hayward back in the fray after what happened to him last season when he had that horrific injury in Game 1 when he broke his leg. What's going to happen with Jimmy Butler and the Timberwolves? Because that is an absolute mess up in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis mess. What about Oklahoma City? You hear how hard it is for people to play with Russell Westbrook, but how far will he and Paul George be able to take them? Will they be able to match up against Golden State? I highly doubt it, but, you never know how things can play out. Kawhi and his weird laugh are up in Toronto. Some folks say Toronto is one of the two squads in the East who can beat Golden State. Does he put them over the top to actually be able to do so? How far will Joel Embiid and the 76ers get this year? There's so many great storylines in the NBA after an amazing offseason. And I am so hyped to see how this season plays out. Speaking of the Lakers and the Rockets, Chris Paul, Rajon Rondo, and Brandon Ingram all caught a multiple game suspension after Saturday night's game, which a big fight started by Brandon Ingram, and then it just escalated by Rajon Rondo spitting on Chris Paul. Brandon Ingram caught 4 games, Rajon Rondo caught 3 games, and Chris Paul caught 2 games. Now, with this whole deal, it's interesting, but the biggest part for this thing the biggest part about this whole thing for me is Chris Paul and Rajon Rondo, because Rajon Rondo spit on Chris Paul. And then, Chris Paul points in his face, and then, Rajon Rondo catches him with that left hook, and then they throw a few blows. I'm sorry, but to me, Chris Paul let Rajon Rondo off easily, because you don't spit on nobody, man. You don't spit on you just don't do that. And if I'm Chris Paul, this dude just spit on me. If I'm Chris Paul, I'm catching way more games than 4 games, because I'm about to beat the brakes off of Rajon Rondo. And then, you saw LeBron, jump in and restrain Chris Paul and everything else. There was a big discussion about how that looked. LeBron holding back another teammate. But, LeBron and Chris Paul, they're really close friends, so I understood that. But if I'm Chris Paul, LeBron's going to have to catch an elbow or something, because, it's like, LeBron, we cool and everything, you my dog, but this man just spit on me, and this man, as a result, is about to catch these hands. Like, you don't do, that's one of the most degrading things that you can do to another human being, is to spit on him. As a black man, that's almost just as bad, or that's just as bad as a white person calling me the N-word. Like, at that point, all bets are off. And at that point, yeah, I understand about the team and everything else, but at the same time, I'm a grown man, and I have my dignity, and I got my integrity. And for you to spit on me, no, that's not going over easily, bro. That's not going over easy at all. I'm just going to have to sit out however many games the NBA gives me at that point, because Rajon Rondo, he going to catch all of this. I mean, that's just what it is. We going, two grown men, and it's going down. And even if I do end up getting beat in that fight, he's going to know that I was there. I'm going to leave my mark. I mean, Chris Paul, he got a few hits in and everything else, but no, man, at the end of the day, at that point, all bets are off, and you got to let somebody know that they got you messed up. And, I'm all for being nice and respectful and everything else, but at the end of the day, in a situation like that, you have the right to let somebody know that they got you blanked up. I mean, that's just what it is. And at that aspect, look, I understand the team and everything else, but he going to have to catch them hands. That right there, what Rajon Rondo did, that was some bull jive. Because, listen, I understand, Rajon Rondo. I understand you standing up for your teammates and everything else. I get all that, and I'm with it. But there's a line that you just do not cross when it comes to confrontation. And spitting on somebody is one of those lines. Rajon Rondo, that was some bull jive. Next topic, and this is some bull jive. There's a lot of bull jive going on the last few weeks. Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Tyreek Hill, he had a beer thrown in his face by a Patriots fan last Sunday night during the fireworks show against the New England Patriots in Boston. Now, this incident happened after Tyreek Hill ran in for the touchdown on a 75-yard bomb from Patrick Mahomes. Tyreek Hill couldn't decelerate fast enough, so he ran into the wall like a lot of players do when they run into the end zone full speed. Now, this right here, this is definitely some bull jive. First of all, fans have got to learn their place when it comes to going to these games. You have no right whatsoever to touch these athletes or to throw stuff at them or do anything of that nature just because you paid to get into this game. Because you paid your money to watch these athletes entertain you does not give you the right to cross the line. These athletes, they're not show animals. There's human beings who are in the entertainment business, because even though professional sports is not something like a movie or it's not music or anything else, at the end of the day, professional sports is entertainment. These athletes are there for your entertainment and my entertainment. We as fans, we do not own them. As much as some of us fans like to think we do, we don't own these people. We merely pay money to see them do what they do really well. No matter how much money you pay to see these people, we don't own them. And some folks tried to pass this off as, oh, that's just what fans do, and it's just fans being fans. No, not this. Because this right here, this is that bull jive. Now, there were some fans that, flipped him off and things like that. I'm sure they said a few cuss words, stuff like that. Now, flipping off athletes, I mean, I get it. That's part of it. I don't have any issue with that, because you're not physically touching an athlete. You're not physically assaulting them at that point, because that's not inflicting harm on anybody. Flipping somebody off is just symbolic trash talk. And I'm all good with trash talk. Like, fans talk trash, I get it. Well, I'm good with trash talk to a certain extent, because you can cross the line with trash talk. Now, if you want to just talk trash about the game, or, if it's that generic trash talk and, say this to an athlete or whatever, I'm good with that. Now, when you start crossing the line with trash talk, when you start getting personal or racial, stuff like that, then we got a problem. But so, even though I'm cool with trash talk, even when it comes to that, fans really need to watch it, because some of these things that are said to these athletes in the heat of the moment are unspeakable. And ask a black NFL player or a black athlete in any sport some of the things and words that have been said to them, and I guarantee you, it'll make your mouth drop. I remember I was watching an episode of Undisputed. This has been about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and Shannon Sharp and Ray Lewis, they were on there. They were teammates with the Baltimore Ravens way back at the beginning of the 2000s era. And Shannon Sharp was talking about some of the things that had been said to Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis, he had already been through the whole courtroom drama and everything else. and they were talking about some of the things that had been said to him. I mean, people were calling him, a murdering N-word and just, an N-word, just a generic N-word, a murdering N-word, and just all kinds of just craziness. And when they're talking about this, I mean, I couldn't believe it. And I've heard some crazy stuff in my life, but some of the things that I heard that these fans were saying to him, I mean, it was mouth dropping. So, when it comes to trash talk, you do have to draw the line when it does come to trash talk. And at the end of the day, fans talk trash. Okay, cool. But throwing your beer on somebody because you don't like that they scored on your defense, come on, man. That's one of the dumbest things that you can do. And not only is it idiotic, but it's just straight up nasty. And then on top of that, if you want to get technical in the legal sense, it's assault. Because on the street, if you go out and you throw your drink on somebody, they can file assault charges on you. And, generally they will do that. And it's also idiotic because you paid your hard-earned money to get tickets to this game. Then you paid even more money to get to the game, either by taking a Lyft, or Uber, or if you drove down there. Then on top of that, if you drove, you paid even more money parking at the game. Then on top of that, you pay even more money to buy this beer. And this is not grocery store priced beer. I mean, this is, at these games, these beers cost like $8 for like an 8-ounce cup of beer. I mean, it's insane what they charge for beer prices, but people pay it, which makes this even more idiotic because you pay all this money for this beer and then you go and throw it on somebody like a doggone idiot. I mean, come on, man. Seriously. People that do stuff like this, they do it simply because they know that these athletes can't put those hands on them in that particular scene. Because at the end of the day, I guarantee you, nobody who does anything like this is going to do something like that if these athletes are just walking down the street. They're not going to say the kind of things that they say to them when they're walking down the street, and they're definitely not going to throw nothing on them. I mean, come on. Now, you throw a beer on me, I don't know where your lips have been. I don't know how clean you are. You might be the equivalent of a dump truck. I just don't know. I don't know you. You might be sick. You might have some kind of disease or something that I don't know about. That's just as bad as spitting on somebody, which I was just talking about. And again, this kind of stuff right here, this is the kind of stuff that people catch beatdowns over. You simply don't do it. Fans need to learn their place, period. Now, kudos to the Patriots because it says that they banned the fan from Gillette Stadium. I'm not really sure how they're going to enforce that. That's a stadium that holds, 70,000 plus people. But I don't know how they're going to enforce that. Now, if he's a season ticket holder, which it's a really good chance that he is, then I can see how they'll enforce it. And he's also being charged with disorderly conduct and then throwing an object at a sporting event. Then on top of that, Tyreek Hill, he's taking it a step further. He's leaning towards filing a lawsuit, as he should, because this is unacceptable behavior. And fans need to realize there are lines that simply cannot be crossed when you go to these sporting events. This right here is some bull jive. And we'll close out this podcast today with Kicking It. The newest version of the Halloween franchise dropped on Friday the 19th. Now, it's been 40 years since Laurie Strode survived a vicious attack from crazed killer Michael Myers on Halloween night. Now, Michael Myers was locked up in an institution, but he manages to escape when his bus transfer goes horribly wrong in this flick. From this point, Laurie faces a terrifying showdown with the masked madman Michael Myers himself when he returns. But this time, Laurie's waiting on him. Now, I haven't seen this movie, and I'm actually excited about this movie because I just gave you the premise of what it's about. But I'm excited for this movie, and I'm ready to see it. Now, to be quite honest with you, I didn't even know there was a new Halloween in the works until I saw the trailer for this one just a few weeks ago. So I got to go see this one, and I'm going to check out. I also still got to see Venom too, man. I haven't been able to catch up on the flicks like I want to. They got a few good movies coming out this fall season because we got Venom and Halloween that's already out. We got Hunter Killer coming up soon. We got Widows. We got The Hate You Give. That's in theaters right now. That looks like a really good movie as well. And then we got Aquaman coming out in December. So it's a lot of good flicks coming out this fall season. Then on Red Table Talk yesterday, Red Table Talk is one of those riveting series. It's on Facebook. I think it's like Facebook Watch or something like that. But on this episode last night, there was part one where Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith talked about their marriage. And I think this particular part of it's a multi-part series with Will Smith, and they talk about their marriage and their relationship, the ups and the downs, the ins and the outs. And man, what I took away from part one, which was about 25 minutes long, and what I took away from it is Will Smith and Jada Pinkett even though Will Smith is one of the biggest movie stars in the world, they're regular people, and they are so relatable. They're funny, but and you know, throughout their ups and the downs, you can tell when they're talking that, you know, some of the painful experiences that they went through, you can tell how it affected them. But at the same time, you can tell that not only did it make them stronger, you can tell that these are two people who genuinely love each other. Like, they have such a beautiful marriage that I love it. I think it's awesome. And the thing that I liked about it was these are two people who, they acknowledge each other's flaws, and they don't talk crazy to each other. And one thing I really liked was when Will Smith was talking about him and Jada were first dating. I think they had gotten to they were at some party, like a Pictionary party or something like that. Jada cussed at him, and he pulled her into the next room and he let her know, like, look, if we're going to be together, we're not going to be arguing. We're not going to be raising voices. We're not going to be cussing at each other. If we have a miscommunication, we sit down and we talk about it. Because I didn't know this about Will Smith. He watched his dad, you know, punch his mom in the face and abuse her, you know, as a kid. And he made up in his mind that he was not going to be, he made up in his mind that he was not going to create a household like that with that kind of chaos and that kind of abuse. And when I saw that, I'm like, man, you know, I thought that was huge. Like, Will Smith is that dude. Like, I already love this dude as an actor, but just as a person, Will Smith is what that is. And you can tell Will Smith is just a genuinely good dude. And on top of that, if you're not following Will Smith, his social media channels on Instagram and YouTube, you are severely missing out. But this Red Table Talk series, if you did not see this episode last night, I encourage you to get on Facebook and go watch it, because it gives you a decent aspect, not only into their marriage, but what it takes to be in a long-term marriage, the things that you might have to go through. And they did it in such a way where the average person can take it and add it into their relationship life. It's awesome. So check it out, Red Table Talk on Facebook. Well, that's going to do it for episode 28 of the Undrafted Podcast. I'm your host, Rochelle Hamilton Jr. Thank you to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for blessing me with the gifts, the talents, the resources to do this podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day to tune in and come and kick it with me on the Undrafted Podcast. And remember, you can follow the Undrafted Podcast on Instagram at the Undrafted Podcast or on Twitter at the Undrafted Pod. And I want to leave you with a Bible passage, Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Because if you got God, you got it all. Do your best and let God handle the rest. Be blessed.